The 1990s were a strange turning point for horror.
What are you then? I'm alive. Then what are you doing here?
Practical effects met psychological dread. Urban legends replaced masked killers. Fear became quieter, more personal, more existential. At the time, many of these films were misunderstood, overshadowed, or reduced to gimmicks. Today, they feel sharper, deeper, and far more unsettling than anyone expected. Number 8. Jacob's Ladder, 1990. When Jacob's Ladder was released, audiences struggled to categorize it. It was marketed as horror, yet it refused to follow familiar rules. There was no clear villain, no clean logic, and no comforting structure.
What are you then? I'm alive. Then what are you doing here?
Instead, the film dropped viewers into the fractured psyche of a Vietnam veteran whose reality slowly unravels through hallucinations, paranoia, and terrifying flashes of the unnatural. Streets distort, faces flicker, and everyday life becomes hostile and unrecognizable. What makes Jacob's Ladder even more powerful today is how closely it mirrors modern conversations about trauma and psychological damage.
Ooh, and a sense of humor. I love it.
The horror is not a monster stalking its prey, but a mind collapsing under the weight of guilt, memory, and suppressed truth. The film treats trauma as something invasive and relentless. The demonic imagery feels symbolic rather than literal, giving the story a deeply personal edge that modern audiences are far more prepared to understand. The film's influence is now unmistakable. Its visual language shaped later horror cinema and video games, yet few successors matched its emotional weight. The final act recontextualizes everything not as a cheap twist, but as a devastating spiritual conclusion about acceptance and release. Number 7. Candyman, 1992. Candyman arrived during the height of slasher dominance, yet it stood apart immediately.
You don't believe all that nonsense anyway, do you?
Rather than centering on spectacle, it focused on myth, belief, and history. Set within Chicago housing projects, the film explores how stories survive long after violence is buried. Candyman is not simply summoned by saying his name. He is sustained by fear, memory, and collective trauma. Viewed today, the film feels startlingly sophisticated. It confronts race, class, and systemic neglect without turning those realities into background dressing. The supernatural horror is inseparable from social reality.
Well, you found him.
Candyman exists because society created the conditions for him to exist. His legend becomes a coping mechanism, a warning and a curse all at once. Tony Todd's performance is haunting not because of brutality, but because of restraint and sorrow. Modern horror audiences now recognize Candyman as a foundational work of socially conscious supernatural cinema. Its use of atmosphere, sound, and urban folklore feels timeless. Number 6. In the Mouth of Madness, 1994. In the Mouth of Madness may be the most prophetic horror film of the decade. At its core, it tells a story about fiction rewriting reality and humanity losing control of the narratives it consumes. An insurance investigator is sent to locate a missing horror author, only to discover that the author's books may be reshaping the world itself. Logic collapses as towns appear from nowhere and sanity erodes. At the time, its metastructure confused audiences. Today, it feels uncannily accurate. The film explores mass belief hysteria and the terrifying idea that reality bends to shared stories. In an era dominated by viral narratives online, fandom obsession, and misinformation, the film's themes feel disturbingly current. Carpenter presents a world where truth no longer matters once belief takes hold. The film's Lovecraftian nihilism is uncompromising. There is no heroism, no escape, and no victory. Humanity is not under attack. It is irrelevant. That bleak worldview once alienated mainstream audiences. Number 5. The Craft, 1996. For years, The Craft was dismissed as a stylish teen witch movie aimed at a very specific audience. That dismissal missed what the film was actually doing. Beneath the black lipstick and candlelit rituals lies a sharp supernatural parable about power isolation and the dangerous illusion of control. The story follows 4 girls drawn together by loneliness, trauma, and social exclusion who turn to witchcraft not for chaos but for agency in a world that repeatedly ignores them. What makes The Craft feel stronger today is how clearly it understands the psychology of empowerment. Magic does not arrive as a fantasy escape.
It's like what Lyria was talking about, throwing things out of balance.
It arrives as a temptation. Each spell answers a real emotional wound. Pow. Popularity, beauty, safety, belonging. The film shows how power gained without self-awareness becomes corrosive. As confidence grows, empathy disappears. What begins as solidarity fractures into domination, paranoia, and cruelty. That arc feels uncannily modern in an age of influence, visibility, and performative strength. The supernatural elements function as metaphors rather than spectacle. Rituals feel intimate and personal rather than epic.
It's coming back ×3.
The magic is grounded, emotional, and volatile. Consequences arrive slowly and without mercy. The film refuses to glamorize unchecked power. Every gain costs something, and the cost is often internal. Sanity, friendship, and identity erode quietly. Number 4. Event Horizon, 1997. Event Horizon was marketed as a science fiction thriller, but what it delivered was pure supernatural horror, wrapped in cosmic dread. The premise is deceptively simple. A rescue crew investigates a missing spacecraft that has returned from beyond the known universe. What they find is not alien life, but something far worse. A doorway to a place where physics, morality, and sanity collapse entirely. At the time, audiences were unprepared for how bleak and uncompromising the film was. Today, that bleakness is its greatest strength. Event Horizon presents hell not as a religious abstraction, but as a dimension shaped by human fear, pain, and guilt. The ship becomes a haunted house in space,
Captain, I don't want to take up any more.
If you'll just follow the rest of the crew to the grav tanks.
feeding on personal trauma. Each character is confronted not by monsters, but by memories they cannot escape. What makes the film resonate now is its refusal to explain or soften its horror. There is no scientific solution, no moral lesson that saves the crew. Knowledge itself becomes a threat. Curiosity opens the door and survival becomes impossible. The film understands cosmic horror at its core. Humanity is small, fragile, and irrelevant in the face of forces that do not care whether we understand them. Visually, the film remains striking, but its real power lies in atmosphere. The sense of isolation is suffocating. The darkness feels infinite. Event Horizon plays less like a space adventure and more like a descent into madness. Number 3. The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Few horror films have been as misunderstood as The Blair Witch Project. Upon release, it was treated as a novelty, a gimmick, or a marketing stunt. With distance, it has revealed itself as one of the most effective supernatural horror films ever made. Its power does not come from what is shown, but from what is withheld. The film strips horror down to fear, confusion, and the terror of not knowing. The story follows 3 filmmakers lost in the woods while investigating a local legend. Nothing dramatic happens in the conventional sense. There are no jump scares, no monsters, and no explanations. Instead, there is exhaustion, paranoia, and the slow realization that escape may not be possible. The forest becomes an endless maze. Time loses meaning. Trust erodes. What makes the film stronger today is how precisely it captures psychological breakdown. The supernatural threat is never defined. The Blair Witch exists only through sound suggestion and absence. That ambiguity forces the viewer to participate. Fear becomes personal. The horror adapts to whatever the audience brings with them. Number 2. Stir of Echoes, 1999. Stir of Echoes arrived quietly in the shadow of a much louder supernatural hit and was largely overlooked on release. That timing mistake kept many audiences from recognizing just how effective and disciplined this film truly is. Rather than leaning on spectacle or twists, it builds its horror through atmosphere, psychology, and the slow uncovering of buried truth. At its core, the film is a ghost story, but it is also a study of denial and moral responsibility. The story follows a man who gains psychic sensitivity after a casual hypnosis session. What begins as mild disturbance quickly escalates into relentless intrusion. Visions, sounds, and sensations invade his daily life not as random hauntings, but as demands. The ghost is not trying to frighten him. It is trying to be heard. That distinction gives the film its emotional weight. The supernatural exists with purpose and urgency. What makes Stir of Echoes feel stronger today is its restraint. The film trusts silence, pacing, and performance. It allows dread to accumulate naturally. The haunting unfolds within ordinary spaces, suburban homes, family dinners, and quiet streets. That familiarity makes the horror more intimate and harder to escape. There is no remote haunted mansion. The terror lives where life is supposed to feel safe. The film also handles its themes with surprising maturity. The mystery leads not to a monster, but to human cruelty buried beneath polite normalcy. The ghost represents unresolved injustice, not random evil. The supernatural becomes a force for accountability. Number 1. The Sixth Sense, 1999. The Sixth Sense is often remembered for a single revelation, yet that focus undersells what the film actually accomplishes. Beneath its famous ending lies a deeply restrained supernatural drama about grief, communication, and emotional isolation. The story centers on a child who sees the dead and the damaged adults struggling to understand him. Horror emerges not from violence but from sorrow and unresolved pain. What elevates the film now is how carefully it constructs its emotional architecture. Every scene is quiet, deliberate, and weighted. Ghosts are not spectacle. They are echoes of unfinished lives. Performances, pacing, and visual restraint reveal a film more interested in empathy than shock. The relationship between the child and his mentor is built on trust, patience, and shared vulnerability. That bond gives the story its lasting power. The Sixth Sense also benefits from a shift in how horror is perceived. Today, emotional horror is valued. Silence is respected. The film's refusal to rush or over-explain aligns perfectly with contemporary sensibilities. Its ghosts are frightening because they are sad, not because they are aggressive. Seen now, The Sixth Sense stands as one of the most humane supernatural horror films ever made. It understands that fear and grief are intertwined, and that the scariest thing is not death itself, but the pain we carry when we refuse to confront it. That insight ensures the film will continue to endure. These films prove that supernatural horror does not fade when trends change. When fear is rooted in trauma, belief, memory, and consequence, it only grows sharper with time. The 1990s did not just produce scares. It produced stories that still haunt,